Welcome down the rabbit hole, friends. For those of you who aren't aware, I'm on my first day of my final pack out. So things are pretty crazy. It's like a tornado here in the house. I was really worried about my son who's 5 and he's on the spectrum. I wasn't sure how he would do with the pack out, but he's been amazing. He's like a tiny little boss who wants to be in charge of everything and put all the boxes together. He's so cute. But in the midst of all of this, many of you have been reaching out with many questions about the Holt family, who recently appeared on the popular Duggar documentary, Shiny Happy People. Many of you are aware and have already heard that Bobby Holt and her son have taken out restraining orders against Jim Holt. In this video, I'm going to quickly provide you with what little information I can. My sources come from the Arkansas Times newspaper, several anonymous sources from Reddit, and then lastly, I'm also going to talk about what Without a Crystal Ball has been posting all over her Instagram and Facebook feed about the Holt family. Everything I say, as always, should be taken with a grain of salt because I'm only providing you with information that I've researched from the internet. I encourage you to always do your own research, to search out multiple sources for information, and to know that everyone we talk about on this channel is only human, yet in the public eye. We can't possibly know everything about the complicated dynamics that go on behind closed doors. So on this channel, I've made several videos about the Holt family. Feel free to scroll back and see any one of them that talk about Bobby's testimony and the specifics on the relationships between the Holt family and the people in the Duggar family. The Holts were close friends with the Duggars before they ever got their TLC show. Both Jim Bob and Jim Holt were involved in conservative politics in Arkansas. The families shared similar interests as well as similar belief systems. However, the Holts have said that they never fully became involved with the IBLP, only attended a couple of conferences after Jim Bob and Michelle invited them to go. But like the Duggars, the Holt family practiced conservative Christian values within the home. The Holts have 11 children who they homeschooled and raised under a conservative Christian doctrine. The family only recently came to public fame when Bobby Holt, the matriarch, decided to come forward and testify at Josh Duggar's CSAM trial. As we all know, Bobby saved Jill Duggar from having to go up on the stand and testify against her brother. During the trial, Bobby testified that Josh Duggar admitted to inappropriately touching several of his sisters. What you may not know is that during the trial, Bobby and Jim became close with a YouTuber called Sojo Files. They actually ended up going on Sojo Files' show and giving a series of interviews about their relationship with the Duggars and everything that had happened in the trial. They also became close again with Jill Duggar Dillard and allegedly also spent time with Amy and her mom, Deanna. I say all of this because it becomes important later. You'll see why. It relates to the fact that during this time, there was a major falling out between Without a Crystal Ball and Amy Duggar. I'm not going to go into that in this video, but they were at odds and it appeared obvious to someone like me, an onlooker, that Amy wasn't talking to Without a Crystal Ball any longer. Sojo Files also made statements about quote-unquote that YouTuber who shall remain nameless. And it appeared that a lot of people were turning against Without a Crystal Ball and her brand of quote-unquote reporting about the story. Meanwhile, Katie Joy began making comments in many of her videos that she didn't trust Jim Holt, that she didn't think he was a good guy. From my point of view, a lot of this appeared to be influenced by the fact that Jim and Bobby were not talking to her or coming on her show publicly, but they were talking to Sojo Files. It appeared as though Sojo Files developed a very close and even personal relationship with the Holts. They also became friends with someone else who appeared and testified at the trial. His name is Clint, and he testified of Clint, Sojo Files, and the Holts all worked together and appeared together on Sojo Files' YouTube channel. Again, at this time, I remember seeing and reading that Without a Crystal Ball was making statements about Jim to indicate that she didn't trust him. Without a Crystal Ball also made some statements indicating that she believed Jim's daughter had gotten involved with another person who had the same background as Josh Duggar. All of these allegations, to me, they seemed unprovable, and it was hard to know what you could and couldn't believe about what Without a Crystal Ball had to say. Clearly, she does have some insider knowledge. She does talk to some sources from the IBLP, but the sensational ways in which she reports many items on her YouTube channel make it very difficult to trust her, in my opinion. So the Holts went forward with meeting with the directors and producers of Shiny Happy People, and they gave an interview which partially appeared on the documentary. Okay, so fast forward to this year and the new information I have to share with you. This past April, an anonymous source posted on Duggar Snark Reddit about the fact that Bobby Holt had taken out a restraining order against Jim Holt. Within 1 hour of that post, Without a Crystal Ball started making posts about the same information on her social media. So I assumed she got the information from Reddit Duggar Snark page. Within 2 hours of the post being made on Reddit, it was taken down by moderators who said, we're not going to talk about this information here in this group. It's just not really something we want to bring up. There could potentially be legal issues going on here, and we don't want to do anything to hurt this family. However, other Reddit groups picked up the story, and eventually the Arkansas Times wrote about what was going on with the Holts. On April 21st, 2023, an order of protection was filed by Bobby Holt. No divorce proceedings were filed between Bobby and Jim. However, In Touch was able to find out that a few days prior to Bobby placing her restraining order, her son, Samuel Holt, placed the original restraining order against his father, Jim. Samuel is 20 years of age. Meanwhile, Without a Crystal Ball took to her social media to make post after post about what was going on with the Holts and the documentary. She let everyone know that she reached out to the producers and directors of the documentary and told them, hey, guess what's going on with Jim Holt? I told you all along he was a horrible person. According to Without a Crystal Ball, she believed the documentary, Shiny Happy People, was going to be based primarily on what Jim Holt had to say to the producers. She made several posts saying that she didn't expect anything new and great from the documentary, and she was concerned that it would feature Jim Holt. Immediately after the documentary was released, I realized that this just didn't really seem to be the case. Jim and Bobby appear sporadically throughout the documentary, but overall, the information that's being presented doesn't seem to rely wholly upon them. I also didn't feel as though Jim or Bobby are portrayed as some kind of heroic couple. It felt like it was a very minor role that was given to this couple in the documentary to specifically talk about what they testified on the stand about Josh Duggar. And as a reminder, we should all remember that Without a Crystal Ball, Katie Joy interviewed on her channel Caleb Williams, who she identified as a registered sex offender who was friends with Josh. And she said, he may not be the most ideal person to talk to, but I believe that he's telling the truth and I want to be able to talk to him on my platform. But sadly, Katie Joy has a history of criticizing others for things she regularly does on her own platforms. But regardless, Without a Crystal Ball wanted people to know that all is not well within the Holt family, seemingly. she has continued to make countless posts about Jim Holt and his family. What I heard from anonymous sources that I cannot verify on Reddit is that Jim and his son Samuel have a history of getting into altercations with one another. In April, an altercation took place between Sam and his father Jim that became physical, and police were called to the home. The altercation, and this is all allegedly, took place in front of Bobby and some minor children. The outcome of the situation was that Samuel decided to file a restraining order against his dad. And therein, Bobby Holt was possibly almost pressured to do the same to protect the minor children who were witnesses to the situation. Again, this is all alleged, but it kind of gives us a possible idea of what might have happened within the family to cause some of what's going on right now. It's all very sad, and I really hope that Bobby and her kids are doing just fine. I don't want to jump to conclusions about what did or didn't happen between all of them. I have watched a lot of interviews that Bobby and Jim have given through YouTube. They also have their own YouTube channel, and I follow them on social media. Many of the kids are still posting a lot on Instagram and don't seem to be showing any signs of the turmoil that's going on within their families. But I'm sure, like we all know, social media posts aren't always the most accurate reflection of what's going on in your real life. Either way, in my opinion, whatever is happening within the Holt family, it doesn't distract from what we learned through the documentary. The director and the producers had no awareness that this was going to happen between the Holts when they put them on the show. It is true that supposedly Katie Joy contacted them and let them know about the restraining order like 2 weeks before the documentary was supposed to come out. So it's not like they could go back and re-edit Jim Holt out of it. But I also feel that even if Jim has negative interpersonal relationships within his own family, it doesn't distract from the fact that Bobby has real truths to bring to the table about what happened with Josh Duggar and his family years ago. I will be continuing to follow this story and bring you information as it becomes available, and I will be praying for Bobby and her kids. Without a crystal ball's ongoing and almost manic posting about Jim Holt and his family has led to allegations she's making that Jim is a longtime physical abuser of his wife and kids. I personally have no significant evidence to prove this, but Katie Joy does talk about it extensively on her channel and in her social media posts, and I want you to be aware of that. Again, I will continue to bring you any updated information I obtain, and I hope that you guys will join me again to head down our next rabbit hole. The following is a video I made about 10 months ago. It includes clips from an interview the Holts gave on their own YouTube channel, which is now taken down. I hope by sharing this video, you can get a better idea of what the Holts look like and how they interact and speak with people during public interviews regarding the Duggar family. Jim and Bobby Holt have released an interview on their own YouTube channel, which has changed my mind about the role the Holt family played in the Duggar story and in the journey of the IBLP. So here we go, friends.
Anytime I found that any organization that is willing to cover up things and not deal with crime in their church, and they're willing to cover that up. In my opinion, it's become a cult.
I've talked about the Holt family on this channel in a couple of videos over the past few months. Bobby and Jim Holt were close friends of Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar. They attended the Duggar home church. They were involved in the IBLP. They allowed Josh Duggar to date with a purpose one of their daughters. And then they were exposed to Josh's inappropriate behavior. Here they are, appearing on one of the Duggars' many TLC series.
That family of 8 kids are the Holts. Father Jim has known Jim Bob for years.
I met Jim Bob Duggar. He and I grew up together. We went to Shiloh Christian High School together from 7th grade on. We were going to sell books together in Kansas, Bibles and encyclopedias.
The Holts also share the Duggars' religious convictions. When the families get together, it's a chance for the kids and adults to relate to people who live life the way they do. Not an easy thing to find. Which leads us to a common question. How will the Duggars handle the delicate issue of dating? With lead son Josh, age 16, this issue is about to become more than theoretical.
We have met others that there might be an interest among our children. You know, they spend time together, never alone, for one thing, just boy and a girl alone. Ideally, we're in groups, and they usually are together with others when we're visiting with friends and that sort of thing. And so, in that respect, it's a protection for their heart, too.
I don't look at it as much as dating as I do looking for a lifelong partner. And I think that you can give your heart away to so many. And I think that if you're going to give your heart away, you need to be giving it to someone who's going to love you and care about you, and not someone who's going to simply get carried away with their emotions.
Our goal is for each one of our children to find that special person, just like I did. And we really believe that God's created that person already for them.
The friendship the Duggars and Holts share extends beyond cookouts and skating parties. The two families compose the core of what amounts to a homegrown church. Every Sunday, the Duggar living room is transformed into a meeting hall.
We just get together every week and we encourage each other and we pray together and study the Bible, and it's just a neat little fellowship.
The service at the Duggars and the home of the Duggars, the spirit is very sweet, and the whole church is like a big family.
There have been times this small church meeting has swelled to over 100. One more reason to look forward to that new house. But long before the new house is complete, yet another Duggar will be added to the old one. But there has been a last-minute change of heart. Not about the baby, but what to call him. Judah Benjamin has been replaced. This boy will be Jackson Levi. And the time to meet him is at hand.
We're ready.
Bobby Holt is the only family friend or family member to testify in a court of law about what happened with Josh Duggar so many years ago when he first SM'd his younger siblings. She testified and helped put Josh away for 12 years. She did what many others were too scared or too weak to do. And I'm here to bring you new information Bobby and Jim Holt are finally sharing on their own YouTube channel. What does this interview spring out of? First, the Holts recently provided an interview to a YouTube channel called Sojo Files, where they addressed the Josh Duggar scandals. The first part of that interview is available on Sojo Files, but the second part has not yet been released. Meanwhile, if you're not aware, Jim Holt is a long-term, extremely active conservative politician. There are so many campaign ads I found that I could share with you from the past 20 years, and here is just a snippet of what's available on YouTube.
right now we have to ask ourselves at this point and juncture in our nation's history, which path are we going to take? Is it going to be a continued path on the road to socialism? Or is it going to be a continued path, or change the path back to the path of freedom?
Is there room for compromise? Is there room for getting in there on certain issues and making things work? Because I mean, I guess
compromise is the art of politics.
Right.
Is what most people say.
Right.
I wish that you would have asked that in there, because that's a great question.
Are you tired of voting a good man into office and then he turns around and votes how the establishment wants him to instead of doing what's right? Well, I know I am. That's why I encouraged my husband, Jim Holt, to run for U.S. Senate. He's been a man who hasn't changed with the administration. He's voted conservative no matter who's in charge. He's been a consistent voice for we the people and not the party line. If you want someone who has voted against his own pay raise every time and has the best anti-tax, anti-growth in government record there is, someone who knows Obamacare is socialism and must be repealed, that life begins at conception and benefits should never be given to those who are here illegally, then Jim Holt is your man. Go to jimholt.us and check out his voting record and see for yourself. That's jimholt.us. This isn't rhetoric. It's a documented fact. It's time we take back our country for good instead of trusting it to just another politician. Remember, Jim Holt is not for sale. So vote Jim Holt for U.S. Senate this Tuesday, May 18th in the Republican primary.
Thanks, son. I'm Jim Holt, and I approve this message. Paid for by Jim Holt for U.S. Senate.
So, Jim expresses a lot of conservative and Christian values when he speaks publicly. I'm not here to talk about politics. It doesn't matter to me what the Holts believe about how to run our government. We're all entitled to our own opinions, and I'd like to put those opinions on the shelf to look past any conservative versus liberal stuff and get down to what I find interesting about this interview. But it is important to note there was an election going on in Arkansas that Jim Holt seemed very interested in. He publicly endorsed one of the candidates, and he made a YouTube channel called The Rogue Republic, where he hosts kind of like a radio show, and he talks about his beliefs as well as the candidates he favors. The setup of the Rogue Republic show looks exactly like what Jim Bob and Bobby would eventually share on their own personal YouTube channel a couple weeks later. Around the middle of June, the Holts quietly posted an interview on their personal page, and what they had to say was new, and I believe it's crucial to understanding more about what happened 22 years ago with Josh Duggar. Obviously, I encourage you to check out the actual interview on Bobby's page, but I want to recap some of what struck me about the video here. First off, in my opinion, the video was primarily made to allow the Holts to talk about political candidates and issues they identify with hypocrisy and manipulation in government, but it led down a rabbit hole where they started discussing their lives and how they intersected with the Duggars. My other videos about Bobby have asked the question, is Bobby a hero or a villain in her own right for being involved with the Duggars and allowing Josh back into her home after some of his earliest behaviors? Likely, she's probably both or neither. That's really the conclusion I've come to. We've all done good, bad, valiant, weak, crazy, wrong, life-changing, earth-shattering things in our lives. We've all made mistakes. And who are we to judge someone like Bobby? She was an outsider in the Duggars' periphery. She was involved with them, but only partially, and she left at some point. In my video involving the Holts, I question why people like Bobby Holt haven't spoken out specifically against the IBLP. I've started to feel like so many people who are around the Duggars in the past, They've all turned their disgust with Josh's actions around to blaming Jim Bob and Michelle alone, without being willing to examine the IBLP doctrine that contributed so heavily to what happened with Josh. But this interview with Bobby made me feel differently. Here are some of the important points I walked away with from Jim and Bobby Holt's interview. First, the interview reveals a side of Bobby Holt that doesn't appear unwilling to interrupt or correct her husband. She's definitely not weak in her ability to speak for herself and intelligently discuss her opinions about the events, theology, and politics they discuss. Of course, I was happy to see that, but equally, Jim Holt seemed reasonably able to hold his own, and I got the feeling the marriage operates more like equals than I've been led to believe in the past about many marriages that surround the Duggars. So this made me feel more confident in trusting Bobby's opinions about the events that happened many years ago. Secondly, Bobby makes one thing perfectly clear. She lets us know very pointedly that the Holts attended a home church with the Duggars, but they state, and I've stated this before in my many other videos about the IBLP, that the home church is firmly separate from the IBLP. The IBLP is an organization centered in Christian homeschooling and kind of like self-help ideas for raising young people. So even though many people within the home church attended IBLP seminars and conferences, that didn't mean that it was all incorporated into the church, at least while the Holts attended. The Holts admitted to attending IBLP camps, conferences, and lectures from approximately 1998 to 2000. But the most interesting part of what Jim Holt talks about is why he chose to pull his kids out of the IBLP program. Essentially, Jim reports that attendees about the righteousness of taking several years to quote-unquote work for the IBLP organization once they turn 18 instead of getting married. Essentially, Bill Gothard was telling the female attendees they should lean towards doing some ministry via the IBLP organization instead of immediately finding a husband. This bothered Jim. But Bobby chimes in with the point that one of the main reasons it bothered the family is because following the IBLP courses and quote-unquote working for the IBLP involved the family paying the organization a great deal of money over time to allow their kids to attend and quote-unquote work at the headquarters. Yes, you heard that right. According to the Holts, even when you were working for the IBLP, the family was still paying into the organization, and Bobby states the kids were not getting a salary. So the sense I'm getting from Bobby and Jim in this interview is that they saw through what Gothard was doing in so much as they could deduce it was essentially a scam. Like a ploy to get money. It was going to cost a pretty penny to raise kids to be IBLP holy, and Jim wasn't falling for that. He says they walked out of that IBLP conference and never looked back. Okay, so now we know that the Duggar family and many other families in the home church continued to attend the IBLP conferences. They actually increased their involvement, expanding to working and taking leadership roles in the organization, and they acted essentially as missionaries, spreading the good word about the Gothard method for homeschooling. The Holts appear to be truthfully proclaiming they were disinterested in the whole IBLP shenanigans at a very early stage. They go on to state that as they stayed in active friendship with the Duggar family, they started noticing and speaking out about issues they saw with Josh. They said they spoke out and they were essentially ostracized by many people in their community for it. Jim Holt goes so far as to say he feels they've been ostracized for 19 years and counting. The Holts said that many friends and even family members have made statements like,
some were like, they really didn't want us talking about issues or bringing up questions. They didn't want us to ask questions because it made other people question. And you start whispering and making, you can't believe them. They're just jealous.
Or they're bitter, or they're bullies, or they're not being very loving as Christ would be. They're like, well, how can you say that? These people are really pure and holy. And I remember when Kaylee and Josh broke up, it was all over that our daughter Kaylee was the one that was immoral. And what did Kaylee do? That the Duggars would break up with Kaylee.
He was just a child.
He was just a minor.
We're a curious boy.
When you hear something like that, please stand up for the victims. And if you have been a victim, or of someone that has been a victim, please don't hesitate to call the number that we're going to put up on the screen. That needs to stop. It has to stop. And
we know that many years later, the Holt family was ready and willing to testify at a trial that never took place, all the way back as early as 2006 regarding Josh Duggar. I'm sure we still don't know all the stories that the Holts could tell. So, I'm making this video because I've been on the fence about the Holts. I get that no one is perfect, myself included, but I was really questioning why they weren't speaking out more about the dangers of the IBLP. I think this interview really helped me to understand that the Holts were only momentarily involved with the IBLP, and they had more interaction and involvement with the Duggar family, specifically as friends. I think in this interview, they do a good job of making it clear that they saw the IBLP as an organization that wasn't even worth their time or their money, making me feel like Bobby's role in the Duggars' life, specifically in Josh's life, was mostly as a close friend, maybe like an aunt. They were people who really knew and cared about the Duggars before they became famous, made millions of dollars, and sold their souls to the IBLP. I can't really expect Bobby to speak out about something she wasn't really even a part of. I guess she's speaking out about what she does know, that the Duggars were her friends, that they believe strongly in Christian values, and that influenced their lives heavily. But it's not the only reason they were a part of Josh's life. Again, the Holts and Duggars both have a strong interest in conservative politics. In this situation, their religious affiliations or their political goals really means little to me when I think about Josh Duggar's case. My position mainly changed to one of feeling grateful that Bobby is strong enough to stand up and speak out as much as she can about what she knows. Lastly, through watching the entirety of the Holtz interview and looking at Jim's channel, I've realized that the Holtz have a lot to say about the Duggars' relationship to a certain Arkansas politician. And that, my friends, is leading me down yet another rabbit hole. Thank you for joining me tonight. I hope that you get some good sleep. But before you do, I hope you take some time to head down your own rabbit hole.
Are the Holts. Father Jim has known Jim Bob for years.
I met Jim Bob Duggar. He and I grew up together. We went to Shiloh Christian High School together from 7th grade on. We were going to sell books together in Kansas, Bibles and encyclopedias.
The Holts also share the Duggars' religious convictions. When the families get together, it's a chance for the kids and adults to relate to people who live life the way they do. Not an easy thing to find. Which leads us to a common question. How will the Duggars handle the delicate issue of dating? With lead son Josh, age 16, this issue is about to become more than theoretical.